Imagine a spiritual leader, revered by millions, but also right at the heart of, well, one of the most complex geopolitical situations out there.
Absolutely.
How do you even find his successor, especially when, global powers are involved trying to influence the outcome?
It's a huge question.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through that noise and give you the crucial insights on these big global stories.
And today, we're really diving deep into the succession of the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not just spiritual. It's deeply tied into global politics, religious freedom, international relations, the future of Tibet, really.
It touches on so much. And to get our heads around it, we've looked at a whole range of sources.
We have.
Insights from spiritual groups like the Dalai Lama's own website, dalailama.com, advocacy groups like freetibet.org, but also major news outlets, the Washington Post, AP, Wall Street Journal, Reuters.
Right, trying to get that full picture,
Yeah.
all the different angles on what's happening.
Exactly. So our mission today, let's unpack the traditional ways this has been done.
And then look at the current Dalai Lama's, frankly, visionary ideas for changing it.
And we absolutely have to talk about China's role. It's significant, often contentious.
Definitely. Plus the wider international impact.
Yeah.
Who becomes the next spiritual leader of Tibetan Buddhism matters globally.
It really does. So strap in. There are some surprising elements to this story. It's fascinating.
It is.
Okay, so let's start maybe with the basics, the traditional way. How has this incredibly important process of finding a new Dalai Lama usually worked? Because it's probably not what people imagine.
Right. It's very unique. The traditional Tibetan Buddhist method is deeply spiritual.
Okay?
It relies on senior monks, high lamas, interpreting things like visions, dreams, specific omens.
Omens. Wow.
Yes. And they also use specific tests. Often, this involves presenting a young child candidate with items, some belonging to the previous Dalai Lama, some not.
To see if they recognize the previous incarnations things.
Exactly. It's about identifying spiritual signs above all else.
Yeah.
Not like an election or anything remotely similar.
So a really spiritual, almost mystical kind of search. And how long did this usually take historically? It sounds like it wouldn't be quick.
Oh, definitely not quick. This patient search, it could go on for years.
Years.
Sometimes even longer. They were looking for a very young child, often just a toddler, who showed these specific signs of being the reincarnation. So yeah, never rushed.
Okay, so that's the tradition, centuries old. But the current Dalai Lama, the 14th, he's taking a very different approach, isn't he? Very proactive about his own succession.
He is, and it's a really significant shift.
What's he actually said or put forward?
Well, recently he made it very clear. Only his foundation, the Gaden Phodrang Trust, has the legitimate authority to identify his successor.
The Gaden Phodrang Trust, what's their role, traditionally?
They've historically managed the Dalai Lama's affairs, both temporal and spiritual. It's basically the core of the Tibetan government in exile, so by naming them exclusively.
He's trying to control the process, keep it within his trusted circle.
Essentially, yes. To safeguard that spiritual continuity and, crucially, minimize disputes after he's gone. Avoid a power vacuum.
That makes sense. So, moving the decision point earlier, and what about the actual successor? He's floated some really groundbreaking ideas, hasn't he?
He really has. Very
Okay.
forward-thinking. He suggested he might even select the successor during his lifetime.
Which would be totally new.
Completely unprecedented. And the successor could be an adult, not necessarily a child,
An adult Dalai Lama.
potentially,
Yeah.
and born outside Tibet. He's even mentioned the possibility, quite radically, of a female Dalai Lama.
A woman, wow.
Yeah. The underlying goal seems clear, though. Ensure the successor is confirmed in what he calls the free world, basically, somewhere outside of Chinese control.
Okay, an adult, potentially female, chosen during his lifetime outside Tibet. I mean, these are huge changes for such a deeply rooted tradition.
They are.
Does this cause friction within Tibetan Buddhism itself? Are there, more conservative groups who might push back against these ideas?
That's a really good point. While the Dalai Lama himself is, hugely revered, any change to longstanding tradition could face some internal resistance. It's natural.
Sure.
But his personal authority is immense. And importantly, many see these proposals not as abandoning tradition, but as a strategic necessity to preserve it.
Preserve it from external interference.
Exactly. To make sure the lineage survives authentically, even if the specific how of finding the successor adapts to the current political reality.
That's a fascinating way to frame it, adapting to survive. But these aren't just internal debates, are they? These changes definitely attract attention from outside forces.
Oh, absolutely.
Which brings us squarely to China. They have a very different perspective on all this.
A completely contrasting position, yes. China asserts its own right, its own authority, to appoint the next Dalai Lama.
On what grounds?
They point to something called the Golden Urn system.
The Golden Urn.
Yes, it's a method that has roots in the Qing dynasty, a historical period when China exercised influence over Tibet. Beijing has basically codified this into their current religious policies.
So they're claiming a historical right, essentially, for the state to be involved in selecting religious figures.
That's their argument. They frame it as historical precedent, and they also have very specific requirements.
Like what?
They insist any reincarnation must be born within the territory they control, so Tibet proper or other parts of China.
Right. So the Dalai Lama suggesting someone born outside Tibet directly contradicts that.
Directly. And China has actually accused the Dalai Lama of, quote, breaking tradition by claiming sole authority for his succession.
So they see his proactive steps as undermining their claimed authority.
Precisely. As a challenge to their sovereignty and their control over religious matters within their borders.
This really does sound like it's setting up a major clash. Have we seen anything like this before? A contested spiritual succession involving China?
Unfortunately, yes. And the precedent is quite worrying. It's the case of the Panchen Lama.
Okay, tell us about that. The Panchen Lama is the second most important figure, right?
That's right. In 1995, the Dalai Lama identified a young boy in Tibet as the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama.
Okay.
Shortly after that announcement, Chinese authorities took the boy and his family into custody.
Took them. What happened to him?
He hasn't been seen in public since. And China then organized their own selection process using that Golden Urn system we mentioned and installed their own candidate as the Panchen Lama.
Wow. So they just disregarded the Dalai Lama's choice and put their own person in place.
Exactly. It serves as a really stark warning about how Beijing might act when the Dalai Lama passes, their willingness to intervene directly.
That is chilling. It really demonstrates their determination to control these appointments.
Yeah.
So looking forward, what does this mean for the next Dalai Lama? It seems almost inevitable we could end up with two people claiming the title.
That's the huge risk here, yes. A very real possibility.
Two Dalai Lamas.
One recognized by the Dalai Lama's Foundation and the Tibetan exile community, likely based outside Tibet. And another one, chosen and backed by Beijing, based inside Tibet.
That would just deepen the divisions, wouldn't it? How would that even work?
It would massively heighten geopolitical tensions. You could see it creating almost a Cold War within global Buddhism.
Wow.
Forcing other Buddhist communities, even nations, to potentially choose which Dalai Lama they recognize. Think about the impact on pilgrimage, on funding, on cultural ties.
Yeah, imagine being a follower and having to navigate that. Which events do you attend? Which teachings do you follow? It puts people in an impossible position.
Absolutely. The pressure would be immense.
So this is playing out on a truly global stage. When might we expect more concrete news from the current Dalai Lama about his plans? Is there a timeline?
Well, there's a lot of anticipation centered around his 90th birthday.
When is that?
July 6th, 2025. The expectation, or at least speculation, is that he might announce clearer succession plans or criteria around that time.
So potentially next year?
Potentially. And those plans could, as we discussed, include things like location preferences, maybe even gender considerations, locking in some of those progressive ideas.
Okay, and the location aspect brings India right into the center of this, doesn't it?
It really does. India's position is crucial.
Because they host the Dalai Lama now.
Exactly. They host him and the Tibetan government in exile in Dharamshala. So if a successor were to be born in India or identified while residing in India,
that would be a direct challenge to Beijing's claim that it must be in China.
A very direct challenge. It puts India in a delicate, but also quite powerful diplomatic position vis-a-vis China.
How is India likely to handle that? It's a fine line to walk.
It is. They've historically tried to balance supporting the Dalai Lama's spiritual role with managing their own complex relationship with China. But a successor recognized on Indian soil, that would certainly raise the stakes.
Okay, what about other international players? The U.S., Western countries, where do they stand?
Generally, the U.S. and many Western nations lean towards supporting Tibetan autonomy in religious matters.
Meaning they support the Tibetans choosing for themselves?
Yes. They back the idea that spiritual traditions should be free from government interference, specifically Chinese interference in this case.
Is that just rhetoric, or is there policy behind it?
There's policy. Look at the Tibetan Policy and Support Act in the U.S., for example. It explicitly states that the succession is a matter for Tibetan Buddhists alone, without Beijing's involvement.
So they're effectively throwing their weight behind the Dalai Lama's efforts to manage his own succession process.
That's a fair way to put it. It signals clear diplomatic support for a process free from Chinese state control.
Okay, so pulling this together as we look ahead, what are the main scenarios we might see play out?
Well, scenario A, perhaps the Dalai Lama's preferred path, is that he names or clearly identifies his successor during his lifetime.
And likely someone within the exile community?
Most likely, yes, somewhere outside China's reach. This gives him the most control over the transition.
But even if he does that, scenario B, the dual successors issue, doesn't just go away, right?
No, absolutely not. That risk remains very high. China could still proceed with its own selection process using the Golden Urn, regardless of what the Dalai Lama does.
So they'd just ignore his choice and appoint their own anyway.
It's entirely possible, based on the Panchen Lama precedent, which leads us back to that contested claim scenario.
And the legitimacy battle that follows.
Exactly. The ultimate acceptance of either claimant won't be instant. It will depend on Tibetan followers, on Buddhist communities around the world, and, critically, on which governments recognize whom. It becomes a global contest for legitimacy.
So really, what the 14th Dalai Lama is doing now, it's incredibly strategic. He's using his current authority to try and shape the future, to protect the spiritual integrity of his role from political forces.
That's a great way to put it. It's proactive, it's strategic. He's trying to preserve that spiritual legitimacy against very strong political pressure from China.
Almost like trying to future-proof the institution.
In a way, yes. By decentralizing the authority somewhat, by confirming the process now through the Gaiden Phodrang Trust, he's trying to prevent a vacuum that Beijing could easily exploit later.
It really is this incredible mix of ancient tradition, modern geopolitics, and global symbolism, all wrapped up in one person's succession.
Absolutely. A monumental process.
So we've really covered a lot here, this intersection of deep spiritual practice and raw geopolitical power.
We have. We've looked at the traditional ways the Dalai Lama's very modern, almost revolutionary vision for the future, and then China's assertive political claims pushing back. Three major forces clashing.
It's quite something.
Yeah.
So as we watch this unfold, especially around his 90th birthday next year, perhaps, it makes you think.
It does.
How will this balance or maybe imbalance between spiritual tradition and state power play out? It's not just about Tibetan Buddhism's future.
No, it has ripple effects for international relations, for how we understand the relationship between faith and politics globally for decades to come.
What does it tell us, really, about the power of belief, of spiritual lineage, in a world so often dominated by hard political calculations? Something definitely worth reflecting on.